Hello, welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore the big challenges facing this country and the region. Ecuador is going through one of its most unique political situations, an economic crisis dragging for years, new loans from international creditors, and austerity measures affecting the population. And it wouldn't be much to worry about if we weren't dealing with other issues, a long list of corruption allegations inside the government and even inside hospitals, which profited from the COVID-19 pandemic. And to top it all, a presidential race right around the corner. So what will be the future for Ecuador on all these open fronts? To discuss this, we have economist and analyst Fernando Terán. Thank you, Fernando, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Fernando, what brought us to this economic crisis in 2020 for Ecuador? Because we've been dealing with it long before the pandemic hit, long before we had to close shops and the economy was affected.
Well, let me share with you some background information to understand what is going on in Ecuador right now. Previous this government, there was a leftist government led by Rafael Correa. This leftist government was from 2007 to 2017, and this was a very good period of our story in the sense that we have great growth of, in average, of 5-6% per year, every year. This happened until 2017. In that moment, the current government, which is led by Lenin Moreno, came into office, and we began to experience a neoliberal agenda in a very radical and aggressive fashion. Since this government took power in 2017, 3 years ago, our growth rates are just going down and down and down. We are currently living in a recession, and it is not the result of the pandemic. It is a previous result. It comes from this neoliberal agenda that has been put forward in this country. That's the main issue. We are dealing with a problem which doesn't have to do with COVID-19. It has to do with the IMF, with the International Monetary Fund, and with these policies. That's the main problem in our country right now. So in this context, our future is really uncertain in the sense that we have to face not only the problem of a pandemic, which the government is not capable of controlling. We have to face the uncertainty coming from a state which is going into failure, a state that is every time getting down and without income and with this kind of policies of the IMF.
Fernando, walk us through the main decisions that the government of Lenin Moreno had to take and took to put us in this situation on the economic side.
And last year, the IMF signed an agreement with Ecuador to solve some external debt problems. In that agreement, it was stated that Ecuador should reduce the public sector. And it was expected a big reduction in the public inversion, in public investments, in health, in education. And before the pandemic came out, in December of last year, at least 35,000 people working from the health minister were fired. They were fired in that condition. So when the pandemic began in March, we have a terrible problem. We don't have any people to be able of controlling the situation. That's one main problem that you can see. And the other thing that happened in this time is that the IMF policies require to reduce people also in the education sector. So you don't have the support of the teachers who are a lot of people involved in social policies and are capable of doing some preventive measures in health related issues. So that's two major problems coming from this IMF agreement that you are seeing right now.
So, talking about this IMF agreement that Moreno presented and signed, he said that this was necessary because the government of Rafael Correa, the previous government, have left the country in a really bad position. Is it really true? Did Correa spent too much money on education and health, as Moreno is saying, that will leave us in a situation like we're living right now?
Currently, our political system is not a very clear one. We have a lot of misinformation, a lot of problems related to not having information to the people. And the first thing is that we don't know exactly what the terms of the IMF agreement are, and because they are not public. Everything has been negotiated in secret, and the government is not clear enough to say what is happening, what is really happening in this agreement. That's the first thing that you must consider. The second thing is that there is a lot of lies going around about what happened in the economic policy in the last government. It is not true that we are in problems right now because of what Rafael Correa did when he was in office. It is not true. And this is easily to prove if you think of the following figure. 75% of the current foreign debt was contracted, was acquired in this government, in the government of Lenin Moreno. 75%. So we are dealing with a problem that was created in this government, not in the previous one. So here is a concrete figure that allows you to understand what is going on in Ecuador. The second thing that you have to understand is that from 2015 to 2017, the Ecuadorian economy was slowing down. However, the previous government, the government of Rafael Correa, tried to maintain the public investment into the economy. So it was a situation that was reversible. In fact, when Lenin Moreno came into office in 2017, he was having an economy in a good shape. It was going up and up and up. Our growth rate was recovering. So the main problem that we also have this moment is that if you don't want the state to invest in the economy, as the IMF is forcing us to do, if you don't want an active economic policy, the recession becomes worse. So, summarizing, the external debt was done in this government, and this government is not doing anything to recover the economy.
And just so people that are watching us can understand, why would a president that would have a past, an economic past like the one Correa left, will turn completely over the economic policies that the country has? If you have a nice background and you have like a cushion to support your economic, your finance, the whole country, and external debt as well, why turn it around and why say that we need to be more in debt with international creditors?
What is happening in Ecuador right now is very strange in the sense of the political situation. This is the first time that we have a government that does not have any social support. There is nobody supporting this government, not even the upper classes. The upper classes, the big companies, the big business, are sometimes supporting this government, but they are not unconditionally supporting this government, the Lenin Moreno's administration. So you have a government lacking social background, lacking social support. In this kind of situation, the government has moved to the far right stances. The government is seeking support from two sources, from the army, as in the worst dictatorships of the 17th, and from the US Embassy, which is obvious that is behind this government. You know? So that's the thing, what is going on. You don't have a government with any social support. So the way to survive Lenin Moreno has is to trying to do the best work with the IMF, with the US Embassy, to align with the US international agenda, to condemn Venezuela, to condemn Iran, to do whatever the US wants. It's something similar to what happens in Brazil with Bolsonaro. This kind of governments lack personality because they lack social support. So they have to move to the US position as soon as they can.
And even going as far as getting another agreement with the IMF now for $6.5 billion in loans. And we know those agreements do not come very easy or do not come for free for the country. We need to impose, well, they need to impose in Ecuadorians all these austerity measures that we've been dealing with.
Yes, and their need is more urgent in the sense that the following elections, the upcoming elections in 2021 can change radically the political scenario in Ecuador. And if this happens, the IMF will don't have his favorite client, which is right now Ecuador. So they are pushing us to sign an agreement that, I repeat, we don't know what this agreement says exactly, because this is confidential information. And they are trying to push to sign this as soon as possible. Because here is where economics goes in hand to hand with politics. As far as now, it seems that the left is going to win the upcoming elections. And by the left, I mean the people who is behind, and the social movements, social organizations, the progressive people in Ecuador who is behind Rafael Correa. And they are trying to avoid that Rafael Correa and his people and the movements who are supporting him and be in the next elections. So this urgent need to sign an agreement is related to that. The elites, the political upper classes, don't have a candidate capable of winning the next elections.
So if the government cannot win these elections, how would this look for the government? Just months before the election, we have protests against austerity measures, we have new candidates coming up, and maybe up to 19 couples, like the president and vice president candidates going for elections. How would that look for a country so small as ours?
In Ecuador happened something similar to what happened in Chile. Chile was having huge discontent, huge riots in the streets, and then the pandemic came. The same thing happened in Ecuador. We were having a lot of social unrest until the pandemic came. So the government is happy, so to speak, right now, because there are not a lot of massive uprisings because of this pandemic situation. However, things are getting so worse, so bad for the people, that even in the current situation, we are having small protests, small riots that are growing and growing and growing. It seems that in October, November, the most likely outcome is people in the streets, taking the streets, because the situation is unbearable. We don't have a very good situation. Consider this, that, for example, We are going to begin classes in Ecuador, which represents a lot of problem for people who don't have job. In Ecuador, one of every 12 persons, well, of every 12 people are unemployed right now. So you have a very bad situation. We have thousands of people without having a job, and they have to face this beginning of the school year without any income and without the policies that you had when Rafael Correa was president. We don't have right now public system capable of providing education for everyone. In this context, you have, sorry to say this, but you have stupid phrases, stupid statements from our government saying that the pandemic is not a problem, go to classes, there will be no any problem. It's the same thing like in Brazil or like the US. Government who is trying to undermine the gravity of the pandemic because they don't want to do the public investment to have a good a health system or a good educational system. So it is impossible to think of a country in these terms. The most probably issue that you will have in the next months is a lot of social discontent and a lot of rising. There is no way around.
So what have you seen in at least the candidates that have spoken about any idea of how they want to handle the economic situation in Ecuador? How do you see their proposals?
The situation is uncertain in the sense that you don't have really strong candidates to win the next election. The only strong candidate capable of having a lot of political and social support is Andrés Arauz. Andrés Arauz is from Rafael Correa's movement. Is a leftist candidate, a leftist presidential candidate. However, right now, this current government, the Lenin Moreno administration, is trying to not let Arauz be in the elections. They are doing a real offer against the leftist politician and trying to avoid his participation. This is very strange because we are in this week, we have to know in Ecuador who our presidential candidates will be. And we don't have certainty about that because all the right-wing people, all the government, all the US embassy, and everybody who is with the US policies aligned are trying to avoid the leftist movements to be in the next elections. So the problem right now is not what the candidates are saying, because they are not saying much things. The problem is who will be the candidates. And if there is no a leftist candidate, when every poll is saying that the left is going to win massively the next elections, social uprising is near, is almost near.
Could we be dealing with another October, like the last anti-government protests that were really large that were taking place in a lot of cities, especially in Quito, Guayaquil, in the main cities? Could we be dealing with another large protest like that? Could that be the end of the government of Moreno, or are we maybe in a political and economic stability that we don't overthrow governments anymore?
I don't think that Lenin Moreno will be expelled out from the power. There will be no such thing as they going out. Because the US embassy is obviously supporting him. And this is sad to say, but the US presence in Ecuador is so powerful that you can feel that. The politicians are just waiting to the next elections. They know that this government will not go out, and they are just waiting 6 months. That's their main idea. To have big social unrest? I don't know. It depends, in the sense that if the electoral fraud is so obvious, it will be a huge social response. If they don't let Arauz to become a presidential candidate, there will be a real problem, I think. So everything is uncertain right now.
Fernando, one last question before we end the interview. Your thoughts on the latest news about the electoral council that says that these elections will cost $114 million for all Ecuadorians, and that for each candidate, for each president and vice president candidate, they will have another $20 million in funds. Is that too much for a country dealing with an economic crisis?
And the problem is not how much money do you spend in an election. The problem is, where do you spend that money? In the sense that it seems to me that if they are desperate about the future of the outcome, if they see that the left winning is unavoidable, they will try to not do elections, to postpone the elections, like the dictatorship in Bolivia is doing, like Bolsonaro will try to do, like the US is trying to do, the same thing. And the problem is that if they try to do that move, they will say that it is because of the great amount of money that you need to do elections. But it is not true. The problem is not the amount of money. The problem is their political will regarding the respect of the results. And it seems that they are not going to respect results if those results are not aligned with the US desires.
So we'll keep an eye on these and other topics as well. They're very interesting to discuss. Thank you very much for your time, Fernando.
Thank you.
So we've been talking to economist and analyst Fernando Terán about the current economic situation in Ecuador and how it could be worse before it gets better if we add more austerity measures demanded by the IMF, and what this could mean for the political stability of the nation. Thank you for joining us. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.